Pack your things, my son said. You're not staying here another night. His voice didn't shake. That's what frightened me most. Eric used to be the kind of boy who apologized to spiders before carrying them outside. Now he stood in my laundry room like a stranger rehearsing a line. Behind him, Sienna leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, mouth set in a pleased little curve. My daughter-in-law didn't look at my face. She looked at my hands at the towel I'd just finished folding as if even my fingerprints were an inconvenience. I lowered the towel into the basket. Sienna stepped forward and slapped the basket's rim. Clothes spilled across the tile. Socks skittered under the dryer. A soft, old t-shirt I slept in landed near Eric's shoes like a surrender flag. There, she said. Now you can start packing faster. You have 1 hour, Nora. I didn't move right away. Not because I couldn't, because I was trying to understand how a home I'd paid off 15 years ago could suddenly feel like a rental with a cruel landlord. Eric crossed his arms. You can't keep doing this to us. Doing what? I asked quietly. Sienna's laugh came out thin. Existing, making everything slower, turning every day into a hospital waiting room. I felt my knee throb my left one, the one that never healed correctly after the stair fall last winter. I hated that it betrayed me with every ache, like it was reporting weakness to the enemy. Eric's eyes flicked to my limp and hardened. We're done tiptoeing around you. It's time you go somewhere. Appropriate. Appropriate, I repeated. Sienna walked past me, brushing my shoulder too hard. Don't act confused. You forget things. You misplace bills. You wander around at night. It's not safe. I stared at her, then at my son. Since when do you two care about my safety? Eric's jaw clenched. Since you started becoming a problem. A problem. In the house where I raised him. In the house where his father's ashes sat in a walnut box on the mantel. I bent slowly and picked up a sock. Then another, as if tidiness could keep my heart from splintering. Sienna watched, impatient, like she expected tears, but I didn't cry. Because Eric didn't know what I'd done yesterday, and because the hour he'd given me wasn't a deadline. It was a trap one I intended to let him step into. As I stood up, my phone buzzed once in my pocket, and the message on the screen made my hands go perfectly steady. People always want a clean reason for cruelty. They want one big event, a betrayal, a slap, a screaming match to point at and say, asterisk, that's where it began. Asterisk. With Sienna, it began with smaller things, petty things, the kind that look harmless until you realize they're seeds. Years ago, she asked me to co-sign a loan for a fresh start. Her words, not mine. She wanted a glossy SUV for her content, because she'd convinced herself that nicer photos would fix her life. I told her no. Not sharply, not cruelly. I told her what my mother told me. I don't sign papers, I don't understand, and I don't gamble with my home. Sienna smiled like she understood. Then she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. After that, every favor I did became evidence that I was controlling. Every boundary became judgment. When she moved in, just until we save, Eric promised she treated my house like a stage set. She replaced my curtains without asking. She boxed up my books because they looked dusty. She hung a giant photo of herself in the hallway where Eric's kindergarten art used to be. And then she learned the detail that changed her from irritated to hungry. The deed was in my name. Only my name. Eric assumed, like many sons do, that what belonged to his mother would one day automatically belong to him. But a house isn't a bedtime story. It doesn't end with, and then everything worked out. Ownership is ink and law and paperwork. When Sienna realized Eric didn't own this place, not even a fraction, she started looking at me like I was a locked door between her and her future. I tried to stay useful. That's what women like me do when love goes sour. We work harder. I cooked. I cleaned. I watched their kids when Sienna was filming herself, working at the coffee shop. Before my knee injury, I volunteered at the library twice a week. I mended torn children's books with careful tape and told myself that being needed was enough to justify being ignored. After the fall, everything changed. Suddenly I was fragile. Suddenly I was confused. Suddenly I was in the way. And Eric, my Eric, stopped meeting my eyes. The worst part wasn't the insults. It was the coordination. The sense that they'd practiced. Like they were reading from a script written when my back was turned. A week ago, I heard Sienna on the phone in the pantry. It's already filed, she whispered. Once the evaluation happens, she won't have a choice. Filed. Evaluation. My stomach went cold, as if my body recognized danger before my mind could name it. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a list instead. The next morning, I noticed something new. Eric had my mailbox key, and he wasn't letting it out of his sight. Eric used to toss the mail onto the kitchen counter like it was confetti. Bills, coupons, flyers. None of it mattered until I picked through it with my reading glasses and my pencil. Now he carried the mail inside like it was classified. It's easier if I just handle it, he said, jingling the key ring. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Sienna stood at the stove, stirring a pot she wouldn't eat from. You know how stressful paperwork is for you, Nora. Let us help. The word times help times landed like a thumb on my throat. For a few days, I told myself I was imagining things. Paranoia is what people accuse you of when you're right but inconvenient. Then I found a statement folded inside a stack of dish towels in the hall closet. My name was printed neatly at the top. My address underneath, except it wasn't my address. It was a P.O. box number I didn't recognize. A charge for $1,120 from a high-end electronics store I'd never stepped foot in. My mouth went dry. I sat at the edge of the bathtub, statement in trembling hands, and tried to remember if I'd bought anything that expensive. My world had shrunk to groceries and knee braces. There was no mystery purchase hiding in my memory. I took it to Sienna. She glanced at it once and smiled, slow and pitying. Oh, honey. Don't call me honey, I almost said. Instead, I asked, do you know what this is? Sienna's eyebrows lifted. It looks like a bill. It's not mine. She gave a soft laugh. The kind you use on toddlers. People your age forget purchases all the time. That's normal. I didn't buy a laptop. Maybe you meant to, she said lightly. Then she tapped the side of her head with one finger. Sometimes the brain does funny things. Eric didn't even look up from his phone. Mum, don't start. That's when I knew. It wasn't just Sienna. It was both of them. Over the next week, odd things stacked up like bricks. My arthritis medication moved from the lower cabinet to the top shelf. The door to the garage, my garage, began sticking. Then it began locking. Sienna started saying little lines loudly when neighbors visited. Nora gets mixed up sometimes. She wakes up at weird hours. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Delivered like gossip. Then, at 2:13 a.m., I passed Eric's office and heard his voice soften into something I hadn't heard in years. I told you, he murmured into the phone. Once the house situation is handled, we can stop hiding. A woman's laugh answered bright and intimate, and Eric said her name like a promise. Jade. My son had secrets, and I had a feeling my house was one of them. The next day, a plastic bin in the utility closet slid open, revealing page after page of someone practicing my signature. The bin was wedged behind old holiday decorations and a cracked humidifier. When I bumped it with my knee brace, the lid popped free. Paper spilled out like startled birds. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing, just loops, slants, shaky strokes repeated again and again. Then, my vision sharpened. My name, not printed, signed, over and over. Some attempts clumsy, others dangerously close. Whoever practiced had studied the angle of my N, the long tail on the final A, the way my pen usually hesitated before the last stroke. My stomach rolled. I knelt on the carpet, ignoring my knee's protest, and lifted the pages with fingertips that suddenly felt too cold. This wasn't a doodle. This was rehearsal. That night I watched from my bedroom door as Sienna carried a folder into the garage. Eric followed her, moving like someone trying to be quiet in a house he had no right to silence. I heard the garage lock. A metallic scrape. The buzz of a printer. A brief drill sound like something being mounted or removed. Then Sienna's whisper. Not now. She'll hear. I backed away, heart hammering, and sat on my bed with my hands clenched together until my knuckles whitened. By morning, I had decided something that surprised even me. I wasn't going to confront them yet. Confrontation was what they wanted. Tears, yelling, confusion, anything that could be labeled as decline. Instead, I became a shadow in my own house. I listened. I watched. I wrote down dates, times, words. On Tuesday, I heard Sienna say, "The capacity appointment is next week. The doctor won't fight it if we present it right." Capacity. Doctor. Presented right. On Wednesday, Eric muttered into his phone, "I'm close. Don't worry. It'll be done soon." On Thursday, I found my pill organizer refilled wrong, 2 evening pills missing, 3 morning pills doubled. Mistakes like that can kill an older person quietly. Mistakes like that can also make an older person look confused enough to justify paperwork. I stood at the sink with the organizer in my hands and realized the truth. They weren't just trying to move me out, they were trying to erase me. That afternoon, I opened the hall closet and dragged out the old tablet Eric used in college, the one he'd abandoned when he upgraded. It was dusty, half dead, and slow like they assumed I was. I plugged it in anyway. Then I guessed Eric's passcode on the first try. Not my birthday. Not his own. The name of his youngest child. A small cruelty in that. Trust given everywhere except to me. I opened the files. And there, in a deleted folder, waited the proof of what my son was really selling me for. The first photo I saw wasn't of my grandchildren, it was of Eric, smiling beside a woman I'd never met, holding a toddler who called him Daddy. The photo looked like a holiday card. Eric stood in a sunlit park, one arm around a woman with sleek black hair and a grin too familiar to be new. The other arm steadied a toddler on his hip, curly-haired, bright-eyed, cheeks flushed with the kind of health you get when your life isn't built on lies. In the corner of the image, someone had drawn a little heart and written, asterisk, our forever, asterisk. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't swallow. I scrolled. More photos. A birthday cake shaped like a dinosaur. Eric leaning over a tiny bicycle, hands guiding. A living room I didn't recognize. Modern couch, clean walls. No sign of Sienna or the children under my roof. Then messages. Not many. Enough. Jade. Did you talk to your wife about the house? Eric. She doesn't need to know details. Jade. We need the deposit before March. Eric. I said I'm handling it. Mum's place will sell fast. Mum's place? My place. A coldness settled over me, calm and heavy. Rage would have been easier. It would have let me shake, yell, break something. But coldness made me careful. I clicked deeper. A scanned document appeared, partially torn, like someone had tried to delete it in a hurry. I rotated the pieces and dragged them side by side until the edges matched. A listing agreement, my address, my parcel number, and on the signature line, a crooked imitation of my name. I stared until the letters blurred, then forced myself to blink them back into focus. There were lies you could forgive. There were mistakes you could repair. This wasn't either. This was a plan. In another folder, a note had been saved. Plain text. No formatting. Schedule cognitive screening before POA appointment. Bring examples of confusion. Power of attorney. They weren't just selling the house behind my back. They were building a legal story where I couldn't stop them. The pieces snapped together. The missing mail, the wrong pills, the neighbors being told I was mixed up, the statements routed to a P.O. box. It wasn't random. It was scaffolding. And if they got the POA, they wouldn't need my signature at all. They could move money, sell property, sign me into a facility, and tell everyone it was for my own good. My hands trembled for the first time. Not from weakness, from the realization that my son, my own son, was willing to bury me alive with paperwork. Then I noticed something else. An app icon in the corner of the tablet's screen. A home security app. One Eric installed months ago after accusing me of sneaking snacks at night. The cloud storage indicator blinked. I tapped it, and the past began playing back faithful, merciless, undeniable. The first video loaded, and there was Sienna in my kitchen, lifting my medication bottle and whispering, "She needs to struggle. It makes her look incompetent." In the video, Sienna's movements were careful, deliberate, like someone performing for an invisible audience. She opened my cabinet, removed my medication, and placed it on the highest shelf, far above my reach unless I climbed or strained my bad knee. She stepped back, assessed it, then nodded to herself. "She needs to struggle," she said softly. "If she's shaky, the doctor will believe it." The clip jumped. Eric stood near the living room doorway, gripping his stepson's arm too tightly. The boy, small, bony, all knees and elbows, pulled away with a frightened whimper. "Stop protecting her," Eric snapped. "She's not your grandma." His hand rose. Sienna's voice cut in, sharp. "Not the face. Don't leave marks." The boy's eyes widened, and my stomach lurched so violently I had to put the tablet down for a moment, palm pressed to my mouth. I picked it up again. Another clip. Sienna pacing, phone to her ear. "Once the capacity thing is done, she won't have rights," she said, almost bored. "Then we can finalize everything. Finalize everything." They spoke about me the way people speak about paperwork at the DMV, annoying, tedious, necessary. I watched 3 more videos. Each one tightened the knot in my chest until it felt like metal. There was Eric rifling through a folder labeled property taxes. There was Sienna laughing about having my statements sent where she'll never see them. There was a moment, brief, chilling, where Eric said, "If she fights, we can say she's paranoid." That's a symptom. A symptom. I set the tablet on my bed and stared at the wall. My reflection in the dark screen looked older than it had a month ago, like grief had painted shadows under my eyes. But beneath the grief was something else. Clarity. They were counting on me being alone. They were counting on me being ashamed. They were counting on my generation's habit of swallowing pain quietly so nobody else has to feel discomfort. They forgot that I had survived things they couldn't even imagine. I grew up in a house where you hid cash in flour tins because banks failed. I'd watched my mother barter sewing for groceries. I'd buried my husband and kept going because stopping wasn't an option. Eric and Sienna thought age meant I was fading. Age meant I had experience. I took a notebook and wrote a list in neat, block letters. Protect assets. Protect children. Document everything, Doc. 4. Tell the truth publicly, if necessary. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called someone and asked for help. My attorney, Maris Caldwell, had handled my will years ago. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. When she answered, I expected pity. Instead, her voice turned crisp. "Nora," she said, "do not confront them. Do not sign anything. We're going to lock this down. Lock it down." For the first time in weeks, my lungs filled all the way. Because I finally understood I wasn't trapped in their story. They were trapped in mine. Maris ended the call with one sentence that made my blood run cold again. "If they've already opened accounts in your name, we need to move faster than you think." Maris moved like a storm with a briefcase. By the next afternoon, she'd arranged a meeting at her office. I told Eric I was going to the library. The lie tasted strange, but survival often does. At Maris's desk, I slid the tablet across to her and played the videos. I watched her face harden. each clip sharpening her expression into something like anger on my behalf. "This is financial exploitation," she said when the last clip ended. "And the medication tampering. Nora, that's beyond paperwork." She laid out steps like she'd done it 100 times. A living trust to remove the house from casual access. A new deed transfer into the trust, filed properly. A revocation of any prior permissions. Eric might have been using bank access, online logins, anything. A credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. A report to the bank's fraud department. And her voice lowered Adult Protective Services. I signed what Maris told me to sign, slowly, carefully, reading every line. My name, written by my own hand, felt like a weapon, returned to its rightful owner. That night, Maris sent a formal notice to my bank. The next morning, she sent a letter to Eric and Sienna, certified mail, informing them that my assets were protected and that any attempt to sell, transfer, or encumber my property would be treated as fraud. Then she looked at me over her glasses. "Do you have a safe place to sleep?" "My bedroom has a lock," I said. "Use it." On the drive home, I bought 2 small things, a door wedge and 4 inexpensive audio recorders. Maris had told me to check the recording laws in my state. She couldn't give blanket advice, but she could tell me how evidence works when it's collected legally. I followed her guidance exactly. At home, I moved quietly. One recorder went inside a hollow ceramic ornament on the mantel. One behind a loose baseboard near the garage door. One in the basket where Eric dropped his keys. One beneath the sofa cushion Sienna always claimed as her throne. I didn't feel sneaky. I felt precise. That evening, I found a new envelope in the mail pile addressed to me. Forwarded to the wrong P.O. box by mistake. A bank notice about new account activity. I photographed it. Then I returned it to the pile without a word. Let them keep thinking I was slow. Let them keep thinking they were winning. Because if they wanted to build a case that I was confused, I would build a case that they were criminals. And mine would hold up in court. After midnight, the recorder app on my phone lit up Eric's voice, low and smug, saying, "Tomorrow we move her toward the evaluation, and after that, the house is ours." I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling while the audio streamed into my earbuds. Eric's voice came first, tired but satisfied. I opened 2 more accounts in her name. Small transfers. Nothing flashy. Sienna made a pleased sound. "Good. I changed her mailing address last week. She won't see statements until it's done." "It's almost done," Eric said. Like I was a craft project. Sienna laughed softly. "After the screening, it won't matter. The doctor will check boxes and move on. I'll tell him she's paranoid and forgetful." "Easy," Eric exhaled. And then the facility. 30 days. Sienna's heels clicked. She was walking, pacing, feeding on momentum. "Once she's out, we can redo the kitchen and the basement. Make it ours." Eric hesitated. "And I can finally stop juggling everything." Sienna stopped. "What does that mean?" A pause. Then the faint buzz of Eric's phone vibrating. His voice changed, warmer, younger. "Hey." I could practically hear the smile. Sienna's tone sharpened. "Who is that?" Eric ignored her. I know, Jade. I'm close. Once the house sells, we can sign the lease." And the garage went quiet. Even through the audio, I felt Sienna freeze. "You're still talking to her," she said slowly. Eric muttered. "Not now." "Say it again," Sienna demanded. Eric sighed, impatient. "Once the house sells, Jade and I can—" A sharp smack cracked through the recording. Sienna's voice rose into a scream. "You have a whole other family?" Eric swore. "Sienna," another smack. Then a scramble. Something knocking over a tool cart, maybe, or the stack of papers they'd been hiding. "I ruined my credit for you," Sienna shrieked. "I played nurse and villain, and you were going to leave me too." Eric's voice, suddenly furious. "If you weren't impossible to live with, you stole from your mother," Sienna shouted back. You forged signatures. You messed with her pills. Eric didn't deny it. He just kept saying, Jade needs, needs. Not his children, not his wife, not his mother. Needs. I sat up in bed, heart steady now, and listened until their argument dissolved into sobs and cursing and the hollow sound of two selfish people realizing they'd been using each other. When the recording finally went silent, I removed my earbuds and stared at my closed bedroom door. They'd built a partnership on greed and cruelty. Partnerships like that always fail. Not because of conscience, because of competition. I reached for my notebook and wrote one more line beneath my list. Let them destroy each other. Then I turned off the lamp and slept, deeply, for the first time in months. In the morning, Sienna knocked once too polite to be real and said, "Family meeting. Now." Her voice sounded like someone holding a knife behind her back. They were waiting at the dining table like they were staging a courtroom. Eric sat with a stack of neatly arranged forms, a pen placed on top like a gavel. Sienna stood behind him, arms folded, chin lifted, confident in the way people get when they believe the ending is already written. "Sit," Eric said. I sat. He slid the first page toward me. "Mum, we need to talk about your living situation," Sienna added. "And your health." Eric spoke in a rehearsed tone, careful and slow, like he was explaining a lesson to someone dim. "You've been forgetting things. You've been confused. It's been hard on the kids." Sienna sighed theatrically. "They're scared sometimes." A lie told sweetly still tastes like a lie. Eric tapped the paper. "We scheduled an evaluation, a cognitive screening." Sienna leaned closer. "Once the doctor confirms what we already know, you'll move into an assisted living facility. 30 days. Eric nodded as if he'd just offered me a vacation. "It's for your own good." For a moment I studied my son's face, the familiar nose, the hairline that matched his father's, the mouth that used to grin when I brought home library books. He didn't look evil. He looked convenient. Sienna, however, looked excited. "Once you're settled, we can finally breathe. This house has felt heavy." Eric pushed the pen toward me. "Just sign, acknowledging the plan." I didn't touch it. Sienna's eyes narrowed. "Don't start making this harder than it needs to be." I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. One buzz, then another. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I let the silence stretch until Eric shifted uncomfortably. Sienna snapped, "What is that?" I pulled out my phone and read the message without changing my expression. "Maris Caldwell. Trust recorded. Assets secured. Bank access locked. Fraud department notified." Warmth spread through my chest, not joy. Exactly. More like armor, clicking into place. Sienna reached for my phone. "Give me that." I slid it back into my pocket. "No," Eric frowned. "Mom, we're trying to be reasonable." "Reasonable," I repeated, the same way I had repeated appropriate. Sienna's smile faltered. "What's with you?" I looked at them both, calmly. "It's interesting how confident people get when they think they've already won." Eric blinked. "What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair. "I took my life out of your hands." Sienna's face tightened, a flash of fear breaking through her performance. Eric opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if the script he'd memorized suddenly didn't apply. Outside, the house creaked in the winter wind. Inside, the power had shifted. Sienna recovered first. She smiled like a shark and said, "Fine. If you won't sign, we'll make sure everyone sees how unstable you are, starting at Christmas." They decorated like they were trying to cover a stain. Eric strung lights along the gutters with forced cheer. Sienna hung garlands and posted smiling photos online. Asterisk. Family time. Asterisk. Asterisk. So blessed. Asterisk. Meanwhile, they spoke to me in the syrupy tones people use when they want witnesses to think they're kind. "Did you take your pills, Nora?" Sienna asked loudly, when neighbors were near. "Are you feeling confused today?" Eric added, eyes flicking toward anyone within earshot. I answered politely. I kept my voice even. I let them perform. Because Maris and I had a plan that didn't rely on shouting. It relied on timing. I sent quiet invitations to relatives I trusted. Eric's aunt, 2 cousins, my sister-in-law, not for drama, for protection. I wanted people present who knew the difference between elderly and incompetent, between family conflict and exploitation. Maris advised me to avoid a surprise ambush that could backfire legally. So we did it correctly. Documentation, chain of custody, reports filed. The bank's fraud department had opened a case. Adult Protective Services had taken my statement. A detective from Financial Crimes had called me, the confused old woman, and asked precise questions with the respect of someone who recognized patterns. Do you feel safe in the home? He asked. I will, I told him. Once I'm not alone. We arranged for an officer to be nearby during the holiday gathering. Not to burst in for theatrics, but to respond quickly if the situation escalated. On Christmas Eve, Sienna announced brightly, tomorrow will be special. The whole family together. She looked at me too long when she said it, as if she expected me to flinch. I didn't. That night I checked the recorders and backed up everything to a secure folder Maris controlled. I charged the old tablet. I tested the connection to the living room television, an easy cast feature Eric had set up for movies. Eric was proud of that TV. Proud of anything that looked modern. He never considered it could become a witness. I placed a small speaker near the tree, under the excuse of holiday music. No one questioned it. Invisibility is one of the few gifts aging gives you. People stop imagining you as a threat. Upstairs, I wrapped presents for the children, simple things. Books, mittens, a craft kit. I wrote their names carefully, trying not to let grief sour my handwriting, because none of this was their fault. And I refused to let Eric and Sienna's greed poison the next generation without consequences. When I finished, I sat on my bed and listened to the quiet house. Below me, Sienna laughed at something on her phone. Eric hummed while hanging an ornament. They sounded happy, like people who believed the story would end with them getting everything they wanted. They were wrong. On Christmas morning, as relatives began arriving, Eric raised a glass and said, "To new beginnings, free of burdens." And he looked straight at me, the living room filled with the smells of cinnamon and ham, and too many perfumes layered together. Relatives balanced plates on their knees. Children tore wrapping paper into bright drifts across the rug. Sienna played the perfect hostess, smiling with her mouth and not her eyes. Eric moved from group to group like a man campaigning for office-patting shoulders, laughing too loudly, avoiding any conversation that required sincerity. When everyone had settled, Eric clinked his glass with a spoon. "A toast," he announced, grin fixed, "to family, to fresh starts, to new beginnings free of burdens." A few people laughed uncertainly. His gaze slid to me and stuck there, deliberate. Sienna's hand found his arm. Possessive. She smiled, wide and triumphant, like the house had already changed names on the deed. I stood slowly. My knee complained, but I ignored it. The room quieted the way rooms do when an older woman stands out of politeness, not expectation. Sienna tilted her head. "Nora, what are you doing?" "Adjusting something," I said gently. I walked to the tree where a small ceramic ornament hung near the center, white-glazed, shaped like a dove. Hollow inside. Recorder hidden within. At the base was a tiny switch. My thumb found it. Click. The speaker near the tree connected automatically, just like holiday music was supposed to. Except it wasn't music. It was Eric's voice, clear, unmistakable, recorded in his own home. "After the screening, she won't have a choice," he said through the speaker. 30 days and she's out. Then the house sells." Silence dropped like a curtain. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. A child stopped mid-giggle. Sienna's face drained of color so fast it looked unreal. The audio continued. Sienna's voice followed, bright and cruel. "She won't see statements. I sent everything to my P.O. box. Old people don't even know what they're signing. A gasp came from Aunt Rochelle. Eric lunged toward the tree. But two cousins stepped between him and the speaker on instinct, their faces tightening into disgust. "Turn it off!" Eric shouted, reaching around them. "You can't," I said quietly. Sienna shrieked. "This is a setup!" The next clip played. Eric again. "Her signature is close. Practice makes perfect." A low murmur rose from the couch line, anger spreading as comprehension caught up. Sienna tried to laugh, high and brittle. "You're all going to believe her? She's confused." I turned and looked at the room. "If anyone thinks I'm confused, you're about to see how clear the truth can be." Eric grabbed the TV remote. Jabbing buttons like violence could erase sound. Then the television screen flickered. The cast connection engaged, and the first video file began to play. On the TV, Sienna appeared in my kitchen, moving my medication out of reach, and the room erupted as people realized it wasn't just theft. It was abuse. The video showed my kitchen from a high corner angle wide. Unforgiving. Sienna opened the cabinet, removed my pill bottle, and placed it on the top shelf. She stood back and whispered, "She needs to struggle. It makes her look incompetent." Aunt Rochelle covered her mouth. Someone said, "Oh my God." Like the words were too small to hold what they meant. Eric barked, "That's private." "You can't." The next clip cut in before he could finish. Eric yanked his stepson's arm, shaking him once in anger. The boy cried. Eric raised his hand. Sienna's voice, "Not the face. Don't leave marks." The room exploded into motion, people standing, shouting, swearing, reaching for children and pulling them close. Sienna screamed, "It's out of context." "Out of context?" one cousin yelled back. "He's hurting a kid." Eric slammed the remote onto the coffee table. "Stop it! This is illegal! You're all trespassing in my home." I took one step forward. "It's not your home." That landed like a stone thrown into a pond. Ripples of realization spread across faces. Sienna lunged toward the TV, hands outstretched as if she could claw images off the screen. Two relatives blocked her automatically, their expressions turning hard. The third clip played. Sienna pacing with her phone, saying, "Break her down and she'll sign anything." Eric's voice answered, "Once she's declared incompetent, we won't even need her signature." A deep, collective disgust settled over the room. Sienna's eyes darted, searching for sympathy, for someone who still believed her performance. She found none. Eric's posture changed, shoulders tense, hands flexing, the mask slipping. "Mom, you're destroying the family." I stared at him. The knocking at the front door came then sharp, official, cutting through the chaos with a kind of authority even Eric couldn't bluff past. 3 knocks. Silence fell again. Ragged this time, like a room holding its breath. Eric moved toward the door as if he could intercept the moment, control it, talk his way out. He opened it. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. Behind them was a woman in a plain coat holding a folder. The woman looked past Eric and met my eyes. "Nora Halden?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm Detective Serrano, Financial Crimes. We need to speak with Eric Halden and Sienna Halden." Eric's face went grey. Sienna made a sound like a trapped animal, and I felt something inside me unclench slowly. Finally, because the truth had left my hands and entered the world. As the officers stepped inside, Detective Serrano added, "We also need to discuss the accounts opened in Nora's name and the welfare of the children." The officers didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Authority isn't volume, it's inevitability. Detective Serrano asked Eric and Sienna to sit separately. Sienna refused at first, clinging to Eric's sleeve like proximity could protect her. One of the officers gently but firmly guided her to the armchair across the room. Eric tried to perform confusion. "This is a misunderstanding. My mother, she's not well. She records things, she imagines." Detective Serrano opened her folder and slid out papers. "We have preliminary confirmation from the bank of multiple accounts opened using Nora Halden's identity." We have mail forwarding records tied to a P.O. box in Sienna Halden's name. We also have a real estate listing draft and a forged signature. Do you want to amend your statement? Eric's mouth opened. No sound came out. Sienna's face twisted. She let us handle things. She asked for help. I spoke before Detective Serrano could. I never asked for fraud. I never asked to be declared incompetent. I never asked to have my medication moved out of reach. My relatives formed a quiet wall around the children. Someone had taken the stepson upstairs with cocoa and a blanket. Chloe, my granddaughter, stood near my hip, fingers curled into my sleeve. Her eyes were big, wet, furious. Detective Serrano nodded once, as if checking off a list she'd already suspected. She gestured to the videos, still paused on the TV screen. We'll take copies of all recordings through proper channels. Your attorney will coordinate. Transfer. Eric looked at me then, really looked. For the first time in months. Mum, please. I didn't hate him in that moment. I mourned him. The boy I raised was gone, and in his place sat a man who thought his mother's life was a resource to be mined. Sienna began to cry, loud and dramatic. I'm a mother! You can't do this to me. One officer's expression didn't change. Ma'am, we're not discussing your feelings right now. We're discussing documented actions. Another knock came lighter this time. A social worker introduced herself, speaking gently to the kids, asking who needed a quiet room. My chest tightened at that because the children were paying for adult cruelty. Eric's voice cracked. I didn't want it to go this far. Detective Serrano met his eyes. You opened accounts in your mother's name. You attempted to remove her from her home through a competency scheme. How far did you think it was? Sienna's sobbing stopped abruptly. She stared at Eric like she wanted to blame him for the whole thing. Eric stared at the floor, and I realized something. The story they'd tried to write about me, confused, helpless, fading, had failed. Now the only story left was the truth, and truth has weight. As the officers escorted them toward the door, Sienna turned back and hissed, You'll regret this, Nora. And I understood that winning doesn't end the danger. It changes its shape. The house felt bigger after they left. Not emptier, cleaner. Relatives moved quietly, gathering coats, whispering to children. Their kindness was real, but it couldn't undo the strange ache of realizing your own child tried to dismantle your life with forms and forged ink. Maris arrived before sunset. She spoke with Detective Serrano, handed over secured copies of the files, confirmed the trust filings, and arranged an emergency protective order. Within days, I changed the locks. Within a week, the bank reversed what it could and froze what it couldn't. Within 2 weeks, Eric was charged. I won't pretend the legal system moves like lightning, it moves like a machine. But machines, when they finally engage, don't care about excuses. Sienna's online friends posted vague messages about betrayal and toxic families. I didn't respond. I had no desire to wrestle in public with someone who used attention like oxygen. The children stayed with relatives, while the social worker assessed safety. Chloe asked me once, voice small, Did Dad really want to send you away? I pulled her into my arms and held her carefully around my bad knee. He made choices that hurt people, I said. But you are not his choices. At night, I walked through my house, my real house, not the one they tried to steal and touch the door frames, the bookshelf, the mantel where my husband's ashes sat. I felt grief in waves. For Eric, for the marriage that rotted into manipulation, for the years I spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. But I also felt something else. Relief. I began going back to the library. I volunteered again. I sat in the children's section and mended torn pages like tiny acts of repair mattered because they do. On a cold morning in January, Maris called to confirm the last security measure. No sale, no transfer, no POA could happen without my explicit presence and consent. My home was no longer vulnerable to the nearest liar. I hung up and stood by the window, watching the snow fall in slow, quiet sheets. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to take something from me. I felt like I belonged to myself again. And yet, when my phone buzzed that evening with an unknown number, my stomach tightened. Because some endings don't arrive with sirens. Some arrive with a whisper. I answered, and a woman's voice said, "Mrs. Holden, I think you should know who times else times Eric promised your house to." I gripped the phone harder, because I suddenly realized Eric's secret life might have been larger and more dangerous than I ever saw on that tablet.